Hi, it's Jordan Teen 1, and in today's tutorial I'm going to share with you my latest Loomigurumi creation, which is a layer cake. So you can see I have two versions here. I did one in the purple and one in the blue. So the one I'm going to be showing you in the tutorial is actually this one on the left, and you can see that with the beads here I did string these on the rubber bands and I made them within the cake. And then with this one here, I had done a plain cake first. This was my prototype. And then afterwards, I used a needle and thread to add the beads. So really there is a multitude of different decoration options you can choose, or icing options. So it would be great for a birthday gift, or wedding or anniversary. And really any occasion. If you found little Easter bunnies or little chicks, you could do an Easter cake, or you can just let your imagination run wild. To make my cake, I'm going to be using some stuffing, so I have some polyfil here. You're going to need a hook of some sort, so I have the Rainbow Loom metal hook, but you can use a crochet hook or whatever you have on hand. I'm going to be using a twist tie to help me get my magic ring started. So that is optional, but if you're new to Loomigurumi, it is definitely very helpful. I have a needle and thread that I use to string these beads onto my rubber bands. So again, that's optional. It just depends on whether you're using bands or not. So if you do need some instruction on how to do this, I do have a tutorial for that on my YouTube page. And then I have 41 beads that I used for my cake. You'll need a few clips or stitch markers. And then as far as my band counts, I used 357 white, 84 purple, 3 pink, and 2 yellow. I'm going to begin by making a magic ring of 5. So for that I have my 6 rubber bands. And I am going to be using a twist tie just to help me get started. So that's optional, but I do find it very helpful to have. And then I have a clip. So if you do have that twist tie, you're just going to put it right next to your hook. Otherwise, you'll just triple the band on your hook. So the first one, as I just said, gets tripled. So it goes on, twist, back on, twist, and back on. And then you just want to pull your twist tie up, bend it in half, and that's just going to help hold those 3 loops together and give you something to grab. So if you don't have this, you'll just have to use your fingers and pinch those 3 bands. Then you're going to take the remaining 5 and you're going to pull through one at a time. So through those 3 loops, back on your hook, you have 2 loops, one pulls through the other. Then from the front to back, you're pushing through those 3 loops. You're going to pull through your second, back on your hook. This time you'll have 3 loops, and the end one pulls through the other 2. So back through, and then here is our third band, one through the other 2. Then you have a fourth, and then your last one. And then you can remove your twist tie, and you want to spread these bands around the circle. Try and get them as evenly spaced as you can. And then you're going to take your clip and just stick it on the band that's around your hook. So that's going to give us our start of 5 stitches. So if you look around the outer edge here, a stitch is this little sideways V. So if you count, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the last one is always the one that's around your hook here, so that counts as number 5. In row 2, you're going to need 10 bands, and you can see that I have them laid out in piles of 2 because we're going to do an increase in every stitch. So you're going to go under your first stitch here, and you're pushing through from front to back. And we're doing an increase in every one. So you're pulling through one through the other 2, and then you're going back through that same stitch for your increase. and then over to your next stitch, and this one gets 2. So typically when you're building any kind of Loomigurumi or Amigurumi, you do the increase in every row to get your shape to grow. So for the top of the cake here, which is what we're starting to build, you do want to have it relatively flat. And then here's our last one where your clip is. Your last stitch is always going to be where your clip is. You're going to do your last increase. So now I'm going to just take that clip out, put it on the band that's around my hook. And you can see it does sort of want to curl in. So what you're going to do is just take a second and try and flatten these out. And then if you count your bands, you should have a total of 10. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then that 10th one is where your clip is. In row 3, you're going to need 16 bands. So the pattern is going to be 2, 2, 1, repeating, except for this very last one, we are not going to do an increase, we're just going to do a single. So we have our increase to start, so that's 2 in the same stitch. And then we have an increase in the second. And then just a single in the third. So then we're just going to continue repeating that pattern. So this is actually going to be the last row for the top of the cake. And as you're forming it, it is going to curve in a little bit, but when we're done the row, we're going to stretch it out and just try and get it as flat as we can. So that was our single. Now we're repeating this pattern again, and we're going to run out of room to repeat a full pattern. So I had decided to just end on a single instead of the increase. So here's our second to last, that's a single, and then where your clip is, that's a single. So when you're done this row, you're going to have a stitch count of 16. And as I said, if you just want to take a second and stretch these out, I mean, don't pull too hard, but you just want to try and get as flat of a shape as possible. In row 4, you're going to need 16 bands, and you want it to be whatever you want your icing color to be. So I'm using purple. So the type of stitch that we're going to do for this row is going to be totally different. We have been going in through these stitches from front to back, but this time we're going to go around the post, and we're actually going to do it from the opposite side. So if you look to the back side of your work, or this is actually going to be the outside, the top of the cake, what you're going to do is take your hook and you're going to push through this opening here, and then where the stitch is, the next stitch over, I'm going to push out through that. So what's on my hook here, this is considered the post, so we're actually going around the post in between the two stitches. So I'm going to take my color, I'm going to pull through. If you feel like your hook's getting caught up at all, if you pull up as you pull through, it's going to glide through easier. I'm going to go through everything since I'm changing color. So now I have just the two loops, one through the other. So now I'm going back down through this same hole from this back side, and I'm pushing out the next hole. So you should see that these two loops here, this band sort of pops up on your hook. And you want the part that looped over here to be up away. So you're just pulling through, back on, and one through the other two. And then back down through that same opening and up through the next. This should become apparent right here on your hook. And through. So this is going to give you that nice border. So through and back up the next. So it may feel a little bit awkward since you're going through from the back side. And as I said, if it feels like your hook's getting hung up at all, if you just pull up on it, it usually helps to slide through. And I can tell that this is really curving upward as I'm doing this, since I'm sort of having to push on it. So even though I did flatten it out, it's getting curved again. But I'll fix that when we get done here. So we're almost back to the start here, just a couple more. And then here's my last one. And then I'm going to just move that clip. And then, as I said, you can just straighten this out. Try and get it to be nice and flat. In row 5, you're going to need a total of 16 bands, and you're just doing one single crochet into each stitch. So I just have the bands laid out so you can see that I've added a bead on every third rubber band. So it's totally up to you. You do not have to add beads. You can leave it plain. You can really do any kind of decoration you like. So here's what we've been working on so far, and we do have to do one thing before we continue. You can see that this rubber band is sticking up through here. This is our color, and we need to be working in these white stitches that are underneath. So I'm going to have to get this band to transition down, and the best way that I found to do that is what I'm going to do is go to this next purple one over to the left. I'm going to push up through those two purple loops, and I'm going to grab this rubber band on my hook. I'm going to have to take off the clip for a moment here, and I'm just going to pull that down through. So that's just going to complete that circle. And now if you look here underneath, this white that's right underneath is actually not a true stitch. That was made from doing our slip stitch from changing colors. So it's actually this next one over that we want to start in. So you have your two loops, and we always push from the inside out, but this time we're only going to go under this inner loop. So I think I'm just going to leave the clip off for now, and I'm going to push under from front to back, but only under that inner loop. So it's going to pull through everything since we're changing colors, and one through the other. and then I'm just working my way around just under that inside loop. And then on that third one, I'm going to add my first rubber band that has a bead on it. So there's really nothing different that you have to do for that. It just goes the same way. So if you wanted to, you could add more or less beads, or none at all. I just happen to use this size and this color because I had them on hand. And I think they're sort of a nice festive color. So this is building the side of the cake here. By just going in this inner loop, it's going to make the cake form down to make the rounded sides. So I had actually spent quite a long time messing around with different patterns, trying to create the exact shape that I wanted. I probably spent several hours doing that. And then you can see how it looks. Sometimes the beads get a little bit hidden, but you can work on that. So we're coming around here to the end of this row. I have 2 left here. And then I'm going to reattach my clip here. And if you feel like any of your beads are hidden, you can just take a second and sort of push them out. In row 6, we once again have 16 bands, and you can see that I'm adding my beads. I'm starting with 3 singles, and then I'll add my bead on the 4th, and I'm doing that bead every 3rd stitch after that. So if you recall, we did a slip stitch on the previous row. So once again, ignore this first white. You may think that's an actual stitch, but it's not. And if you look to the side, you can see that it's not a true stitch, that this one is the actual stitch. So you're pushing under both loops now. We're doing just a regular single crochet, and I'm doing 3 to start. So 1 in each. And I'm just doing that to get the spacing right. So we have our beads spaced out nice and evenly. So now in this 4th stitch, I'm going to put my first bead, and I'm trying to get the colors spaced out as well here. So now I have 2 without, and then the next one with, and then I'm just continuing that pattern. So I think if you were using larger beads, you would probably want to use less than what I'm doing. And then after this, we're going to have one more row of the same thing, where we're just building our layer down. So here's my last one, and let me just point out that there is a larger gap here from doing our slip stitch. So what I'm going to do is go in through the stitch, but then I also want to pick up another white band just to close this off. So I'm not going to pick up this front band here because then that will expose more of the purple transition we did here. So I'm going to go and get the other side of that. Let me just show you here. I'm going to pick up this underside of the white. So through the stitch, and then just go under this inside loop of the white, and that's just going to help to close that hole off. And I happen to have a bead on my last one there, so you can see that looks better. And I think the bead will help to hide the hole as well. And then just move my clip. And when you do rows that don't expand or decrease, they do sort of want to close in a little bit. So you can always, after every row, just sort of stretch this out just slightly so it stays in a same shape as the previous row. And then again, if you're using beads, make sure that they are nice and visible. In row 7, you're going to need 16 bands, and once again it's just one single crochet into every stitch. So you can see I have my beads laid out. I'm doing the first bead on the second stitch, and then 2 plain in between every bead, repeating. So I'm just going to go ahead and let you do this row on your own since it's pretty straightforward. So you can pause here, and I will see you back here in a minute. In row 8, you're going to need a total of 26 bands. We're doing the pattern of 2-2-1, 2-2-1 repeating. So the only difference to this pattern is we're going to do a single on the very last stitch instead of an increase. And in this row we are going in just the outer loops. So we have our stitch here, and again you have your 2 loops. This time we're just going to go in the outer loop, the one that's farthest from you. So in this V shape you're going to go down through the center and push out. So we're doing an increase in the first stitch, and then in the second stitch, again just that outer loop every time, we're doing an increase. And then in the third stitch, just a single. So we're just going to continue to repeat that pattern. So I have an increase, and then another increase, and then a single. So the reason that we're doing this is that this is going to increase our stitch count, so it's going to make it wider for our next layer, and it's also going to form the top side of the layer. This is going to help to push it outward to make that top surface. So I think it's actually really fun to play around with going in just the inner loops, going in the outer loops, and seeing what you can create. There's really so many possibilities. So I'm not going to be adding any beads on this section, obviously. I mean, you certainly could if you wanted to, but I've just kind of stuck to doing the beads on the outside of the cake. I didn't do any on the top either, just because I'm going to add a candle and I just didn't want it to get overly busy. So I have my increase, here's my last increase, I have a single, and then if I was following the pattern I would do an increase, but I decided to end on just that single. And you can see it kind of looks messy, but don't worry about that, we'll fix that in a second. Just move my clip here. So you just want to take the time and flatten this out and sort of turn it upward. It's actually going to kind of look like a little hat. To make my candle, I have 2 yellow bands for the flame, and then I have 6 for the actual candle part. So I've decided to do it striped, so I have 3 pink and 3 purple. So I'm going to start with a yellow, and I want to double this on my hook, so just twist and put it back on. And then I'm going to take a purple, I want to double this, and then I'm going to slide it down to the end. I want the yellow band to go in the center of it, and then carefully get the other 2 loops in my fingers to go back on my hook. So we've just linked that together, and now I'm just going to double the next. So I'm alternating my colors. So I find that it's easier if you flip this around, and then it gives you something to hold on to and pull. So if you pull out, slide on, and then get the other end back on. And then I like to just take a couple seconds and just straighten that out. And I'm switching to purple. So once this gets long enough, you can leave it on the same side. So just stretch out, pull through, and then get the other 2 loops back on your hook. Definitely takes a little bit of practice. So pull out, through, and then get the other side back on. Just make sure you're getting 2 loops every time. And then, as I said, I like to just straighten it out every time as well. So if you wanted a shorter candle, you could use less bands. If you wanted a longer candle, you could use more. You don't have to do a striped look, you can do them solid. Although I guess a lot of candles really are striped. Birthday candles, that is. So both loops. And then I'm just going to carefully remove this. If you wanted to add a clip, you could. It's kind of hard to get the clip to go around all 4 loops, but if you let this go, it should stay pretty firm. And then what I'm going to do is take this other yellow band and I'm going to quadruple this. So twist and put it back on until you have 4 loops, and then I'm going to just slide that down onto the yellow just to make that flame nice and tight. So I'm just going to set this to the side for now. Now before I continue to build my cake any further, what I'm going to do is to add the candle. So it's just easier because you have the surface to work with here, it's not too far up. So I'm going to just reach up through, and I'm going to come directly up through that magic ring here. I'm going to take the 2 loops from 1/2 of the candle, and I'm going to pull them down inside. So just be careful you don't pull too hard, you don't want to pull these out. If you wanted to, you could add a clip to this side just to make sure that they don't pull out. But I'm going to pull them through to the inside, and then I'm just going to go to the next opening over and push my hook back out. Doesn't really matter which one. And then I'm going to get the other 2 loops to go on my hook, and I'm going to pull them through to the inside. And then I'm going to take an additional band here. I'm going to use the white, pull through everything, and then make a nice and tight slip knot. So we have our little candle here. In row 9, you're going to need 26 bands. It's going to be your icing color. So you can really use any color you like. You can change your icing up, but I'm going to stick with my purple. Now, if you remember from doing the icing from the previous part, we did that on the back post. So you need to go to the back side or the outside of your cake. And I am going to start on this very first post. So you can see that my band is looped through this outer stitch. I'm going to go from the back, I'm going to push through that and push right out the next stitch. And the first band is going to pull through everything since we are changing color. back on, and one through the other. So you're always going to push down through that same stitch or opening that you just came out of, and then up through the next, and that post should pop right out to you. So I think once you get the hang of it, it's really pretty easy. And as I said, you can definitely play around with different color combinations. I was thinking about doing different colors on each row here, but then I changed my mind and decided to stick with the purple. But you can even do different colors within the same row. For example, I think it would be kind of cool if you did like rainbow colors. So I think it's always fun to play around with different variations. I think that's kind of the neat part of making bracelets or any kind of Loomigurumi. You really don't know what something's going to look like when you're designing something. Not sure how it's going to turn out, so that's kind of the fun of it all. And it can also be very frustrating if you know that you're trying to achieve a certain look and if you're having a hard time. I think I didn't quite go through the right part there. Yes, I did not. There we go. If you don't see those two loops really pop up on your hook, you kind of know that you've not gotten under all the right sections. And again, if you feel like you're getting caught up or anything, it always helps if you pull on the main part that you're working on. If you sort of pull on that, like this, it would open up those stitches for you a little bit more. And don't worry if your cake is sort of getting pushed in here. You can always adjust the rubber bands. I like to adjust them after every row, and then when you add your stuffing, it's going to really help to fill that all out too. So I have my last two bands here, and here's my last post. And then what we are going to have to do is to get this to go down before we do our next row. So let me just add this clip, and let me do that right now before I start the next row. You can see here how we have the white, and we need to continue this around to complete that circle. So I'm going to go up through this first purple here, just like I did before. This white is kind of getting in my way here. Go up through the two purple loops, and then I can grab this loose band, take out my clip, and I'm going to pull down through. So that's just going to help. I do sort of see this white still sticking out. And now we'll be ready for our next row. In row 10, we're using 26 bands, and we're doing one single crochet, but it's just going to be in the inner loop this time because we want our cake sides to now go down again. So I have my bead pattern laid out, doing one single to start, and then in the second stitch we have our bead, and then you can see I'm skipping two and adding a bead for the rest of the time. So as I said, we're only going on the inner loop here, And this first part here was our slip stitch, so just ignore that. It's this next one over that's the actual stitch. And you're going to have to come down from the inside and push out just through that inside loop. So once again, we're having a slip stitch since we're changing colors. And then in that second one, I'm putting my bead. And then I'm just working my way around in that one inner loop, doing one in each. So sometimes this one's a little bit tough to get through. It's a little bit tighter from us going through the post. So I think if you sort of fold this over, it helps to get under there a little bit easier. So just take your time. And then again, if you are doing the beads and they're sort of getting hidden, when you get on the row you can play around with sort of making them stand out. I see this one looks like it's kind of popping through the inside more than the outside. So I actually have 7 different bead colors in the bead pack that I have. So I'm really trying to do my best to alternate them and not have the same colors be next to one another. Obviously, the more variety of bead colors that you have, the easier it's going to be to space them out. I feel like I'm really squishing the heck out of my cake here. I actually designed this cake for a friend of mine who was having a birthday, so I wanted to do something cute as a little homemade gift. I actually worked on a cupcake as well. I have 2 different versions I've been playing around with. So when I get the chance, I'm going to be doing a tutorial for those as well. Kind of sticking with the party theme. And then here's my last one. And then I'm going to add my clip once again. In row 11 I have 26 bands. It's going to be 1 single crochet in each stitch, and I just have my beads laid out. So again for this row and then again for the next, I'll let you do these on your own since it's pretty straightforward, but I will show the bead pattern in the next row as well. So for this one I have the first 2 bands plain, the first 2 stitches, and then I start my bead in the third, and then again I'm skipping 2 and a bead every time. Let me just point out that the first one here is not a true stitch, it's from doing that slip stitch, so it's this next one over that's your actual first stitch. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So go ahead and pause and finish out this row, and I'll see you in a minute. Now again, I just want to point out this is my last stitch in the row, and we do sort of have this bigger hole from doing our slip stitch. So we're going to do that same thing where we go through the stitch, But then I'm going to grab a band. I don't want to grab the top white one because I don't want to make that purple stick out any further. But let me just go through the inner white band. And then that's just going to help to close off that gap. And I do see a little bit extra purple sticking out, but if you maneuver these bands around, you should be able to remedy that. And then I'm going to add my clip. Row 12 is our last row of beads. Again, 1 single crochet into each stitch, and my bead pattern starts with a bead on the first stitch, and then skipping 2 stitches, and then another bead, repeating. So the very last stitch is going to end on 1 single band. So again, you can pause here, do that now, and I will see you back here shortly. In row 13, you're going to need 39 bands, and we're doing an increase in every other stitch. So we have a 2-1-2-1 pattern, and these are just going to go into the outer loop. So you should be pretty familiar now. We're going in the outer loop, pushing from the middle out, and we're doing that increase to start. So we have 2. And then the next one gets a single. And then it's just going to continue to repeat. So we're building that next layer. That's why we're doing increases still. We need to widen this. And then again, by doing just the outer loops, it's going to allow that to sort of go around the corner and form the top of the bottom layer. So that was 2 in this one. Now again, as you're building this, it's going to look kind of squiggly here, but it will all smooth out in the end. Trying really hard not to have my cake knock my bands out of position, but somehow or other that always seems to happen as this grows. I did zoom the camera out a little bit just so I had some more room to work under here. So we're really getting down to the end here. We're going to add our last layer of icing, and then of course we're going to have to build a base so we can close off the bottom. If you wanted to, you could not have a base on this, and you could put like a tea light underneath of it to have it lit up. I did that around Christmas time with my Christmas trees, and I think it looked really cool. So that definitely is a possibility. But if you wanted a solid figure to stuff, then I'm just going to show you how to do the base. So just a few more left. So in the second to last, we have our last increase. And then we're ending on a single. So now you want to just take a minute and stretch these out and bend it upward. And that's going to be our next layer. In row 14, we're going to do our last row of icing. So I have my purple, and we're going to need 39 bands. So as you know, we're going in the back post, and I am going to start on the first one here where my band was already through this one loop. I'm going to go through and back out. Remember, you're going through from the back side. Go through everything, since we're changing color, and do that slip stitch. And then back down through the same stitch, out the next. So hopefully you all feel pretty comfortable with doing this, since this is our third section of doing this back post. I'm really anxious to see how everyone's cakes turn out. So if you do make this, please share it on my Facebook page or on my Instagram. I think it would be really neat to see what kind of different decorations everyone uses, or different color choices you choose for your cake or for your icing. I was thinking about making a chocolate cake, since my other one I did was with a white, but honestly I just wasn't sure with having a brown band how that would turn out with adding the icing accents. Kind of thought that it might not stand out as well. I mean, obviously in grocery stores you see the cakes with chocolate icing. So if anybody does one of those, I would love to see that. I think this would be nice to make even if it wasn't for a birthday. You could really do it for any occasion. I think these pastel colors are nice and springy, or for Easter. If you had found little beads or something that had little bunnies or anything like that that you could add, would be really cute. Also for a wedding anniversary would be a neat idea. I know my parents have their wedding anniversary coming up soon. So we're getting down to the end here. I always feel like the bigger the rows get, obviously the longer the sections that I record have to get. Sometimes it feels like I'm never going to end. So it looks like I have 3 left here. And then my last one. And I'm going to move my clip. Next, I'm going to add the stuffing here to my cake. So I'm going to just take little pieces at a time, and I'm going to fill this out, push it up into the top section. So I'm not going to make it super full. I can always add more when I get the base most of the way attached. So I think I'll just do about that much for now and put this to the side. The base is going to start with a magic ring of 5, so I have my 6 bands. It's the same way that we did the very beginning of the cake. So if you do have that twist tie, just put it right next to your hook. You're tripling your first band, and then you're just going to pull through the next 5 one at a time. So 1, back through from the front, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I can take out my twist tie, add my clip, and then again just try and straighten these out, try and get them evenly spaced. Row 2 is going to require 10 bands. We're doing an increase in every stitch. So we have 2 for each. So we want to increase this so it basically lays flat. At least we're going to try to get it to lay as flat as we can. Again, as you build these, they do tend to want to curve in just a little bit. Here's my last one. I have 17 bands for row 3, and we're doing 2 increases followed by a single, so 2, 2, 1 repeating. So the first one gets your increase, and then the second one gets an increase, and then that third one gets a single. So I'm trying to do more increases on this, again just so I can try and keep it more flat shaped. The problem is if you do too many increases, like you try to increase in every stitch all the time, it starts to get too full, and then it's not going to lay flat, it's going to sort of give this rippled effect. So there's a lot of playing around with trying to get the exact right count so that it lays as flat as it can, but then also doesn't ripple or buckle because there's too many bands trying to be squeezed into too tight of a space. So second to last one is a single, and then the last one is an increase. So at the end of this, if you count around, your stitches should be a stitch count of 17. So you can just take a second and try and flatten this out as best as you can. In row 4 we have 26 bands. We're doing an increase on every other stitch, so the pattern is 2 1 2 1 and so on. So we're starting on that increase. And then a single. And that's just going to continue to repeat. So at the end of this, your stitch count is going to be 26. So we're really trying to just space this out here. And the main goal too is you need this to be large enough to cover the bottom of your cake, and you also want to have the same stitch count, or at least as close as you can get to the same stitch count when you put these together. So sometimes it's a little tough to get the exact stitch count if you're trying to keep with an even numbered pattern. So this is actually our second to last row of the base. We're going to have one more row after this. So my second to last stitch gets a single, and then that very last one gets your increase. So again, just do your best to try and get this nice and flat. In row 5, you're going to need 35 bands, and we're doing a pattern of 2 1 1 repeating. So I'm just going to start this row with you, since I feel like you should probably be pretty comfortable with doing this by now, following the pattern. So it's 2 in the first stitch, and then the next 2 are singles. And then we're just going to continue to repeat that. So I was going to do a different pattern. I was going to do an every other increase pattern, and that actually would get us to a total of 39 stitches, and that would match the exact stitch count of the bottom of the cake. But the problem with that was that it was too many stitches. So as I sort of explained earlier, there were too many crammed into the circle, and it was making the whole thing buckle. So I had to reduce the stitch count. So that's why I'm doing this 2 1 1 pattern. So that will leave us with a total of 35 stitches when we're done this row. So you can just pause your video here and finish out that 2 1 1 pattern, and I will see you back here in a moment. The final thing that we need to do is to join the base and the cake together. So for that I have 39 bands, and the base piece has 35 stitches, the cake has 39, so we have to do 4 increases just to get the stitch count to be even. So I have my first increase on stitch number 9, the second increase on stitch 18, the next on stitch 27, and then the final one is on stitch 35. So here with the cake piece, the same way that we did the other two, we're going to have to get this band to come down, and so we can work in the bottom stitches here. So in this last purple here on the left, I'm going to push up through, grab the band, take out the clip, and this is just going to pull down through. So then I'm going to take my base piece here. Let me just zoom out here a little bit. So here's my base, and you can decide which side you want to be on the outside. I'm going to have it be this side here. So I'm going to line this up, and actually let me just take my clip and attach it back to this purple band, because I'm actually going to go through the base first. So I'm going to go to the next stitch around here in a clockwise direction from the way that I've decided to go. If you had it on the opposite way, you would have to go this way, but I have the outside, what I'm calling the outside, the way we built the cake. I'm going to go through the next stitch over and push through that stitch, go under both loops, and then I'm going to get my loose band and get that on my hook as well. I can take off the clip. And now here's my cake. So I'm going to start on this first stitch over here on the left, and I'm going to push through that, go under both loops, and then also I need to grab this purple band. Take off that clip. So there are going to be a lot of bands on your hook to start here. I'm taking my first rubber band, I'm going to pull through the purple, through the stitch, through the other white loose band, and the other stitch. And you can see here I kind of got hung up on the purple, so let me just get rid of that. So you should just be left with two sides of the same band on your hook, and you're going to pull one through the other. And then I'm moving over to the next stitch in a counterclockwise direction, going through both loops of that stitch, and moving over on the cake, pushing through those two loops. I have a single band, it's going to pull through both of your stitches, through the band on your hook. You're pulling through everything every time like a slip stitch, and one through the other. And you are going to have to try and fight and keep your stuffing out of the way as well. That's why I try not to overfill it. So you're going over to the next on each piece. Pull through the stitches, through the other loop, again moving to the next. So we're going to do singles in the first 8. And I typically like to do the slip stitch way, pull through everything, because it gives it a neat sort of a zigzaggy edge. And it's also a little bit looser that way. If you did it like a regular single crochet to put it together, it's going to be a tighter fit. It's going to gather the two sides together a little bit more. So this is number 7 here. And that was 8. And now in stitch number 9 is where we have to do 2. So that's the first one, and now with the second one it's going to go through the same stitch on the base, but it is going to move over on the cake. So that's how we're going to spread it around and get to our 39 stitches. So you can see here how it's starting to look. There's that zigzaggy pattern that I was talking about. And now we're going to do 8 more here. Just make sure that you're going over to the next stitch on both pieces. And we have our 8 more. Ideally, I like to have the same stitch count. I think I said that earlier. It's nice if I could have had 39 for each piece, but the way that it was working out, it just wasn't staying flat enough. So this is just how you work your way around. As long as you're within a couple of stitches, it's easy to just do some increases and just space them out evenly. And then as we get this around to getting almost closed, that's when you can add any additional stuffing. It's kind of hard to add it before because it's really just in the way. So this is my 8th stitch in our pattern. It's actually number 17. And then we're back onto our 9th one here again, stitch number 18. And we're going to again do our increase. I see a little bit of stuffing trying to poke out. So it's that same stitch on the base, but it's the next stitch around on the cake. Let me just try and push some of this stuffing to where I've already attached it. So now we have 8 more singles again that are going to line up. So hopefully everybody is getting the hang of this part. I don't think it's really too difficult if you just try and pay close attention that you're going under the correct stitches to get them in line. I like to line all of my rubber bands up. That way it's easy to tell where your increases are going to be. You don't have to worry about counting in your head as much. So this is, again, the 8th one in my pattern. So the next one will be number 9. So it's actually the 27th stitch from the start. So that gets our increase. So again, same stitch on the base, next stitch over on the cake. And then that'll leave us with just one more increase at the end. So I didn't have enough to count another 9. So actually this last increase is going to be on the 8th stitch in the pattern. Again, I see little pieces of stuffing trying to come out. So just a couple more here. And as a matter of fact, I think after this one I'm going to add some more of my stuffing. It's getting pretty closed off. So maybe I should have done that actually one stitch before. But there's enough room for me to get my finger in there. So just get some little sections. I don't want to fill it too full that the base puffs out. Let me just make sure I don't lose this off of my hook. So let me see how this is. I think just a little bit more here. I think that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to finish up here now. Again, try and get the stuffing away from my stitches. It's going to be even harder now. So here's my last one. I have this last stitch on the base, and I should have 2 stitches left on the cake. The one is where we did the slip stitch. It kind of is sticking up there. And it definitely is tight. Again, I'm going to sort of pull up as I pull through just to help me from getting hung up. And then again, I have to go through the same stitch on the base. And I'm going to grab this one and pull through everything. And I'm going to make a nice and tight slip knot. So you can see how it looks here. So then the last thing I need to do is to hide this loop. So I'm just going to reach up through and pull that down inside. Just try not to get too much stuffing. And you can see this white loop here a little bit. I'm going to try to adjust the purple a little bit more. I mean, it is going to be on the back side, so it's not going to be that noticeable. Just a tiny bit you can see when you make the transition. And then any kind of adjusting you need to do, feel free to do that. But it's pretty sturdy and solid, and I think it turns out quite nice. I hope that everyone loves their new little cakes. You can always leave me comments on YouTube and Facebook. You can post pictures of your creations to my Facebook page, and please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, so that way you can stay up to date on my latest tutorials. You can also find me on Pinterest and Instagram, so please I encourage you to share your pictures there too, and if you do post anything on Instagram, please tag me in it, and you can also subscribe to those as well. Thanks for watching!